What's up, my ninjas? I'm Strident, and I am here with a thoughts video. Um, I saw Deadpool with Agent O yesterday, and it's really cool. I just noticed though, and it's something that's been a trend um, online that it sours the experience when you finish watching a movie you enjoyed. You go online and you see this generic flame war bullshit where everybody's trying to say because they enjoyed something and it was nice, it was well done, that now we have to compare it to everything else and it has to smash everything else because you couldn't possibly just enjoy it on its own merits and call it a day. Now people are they're doing their usual, let's go to Box Office Mojo and give you the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, the selective numbers that are, they don't know that those numbers are selective. It only counts opening weekend everywhere that it was everywhere that a film was released. Usually it's the U.S. Most of the time it's the U.S. But if something had like a certain films, like The Matrix, the first two, or maybe it was all three of them. No, the second two. I'm sorry. They all opened worldwide on the same day, so it had an insane gross. Um, but on Box Office Mojo, they only count the U.S. gross, the domestic gross. So when they're saying that some movie had the highest opening weekend ever, it's the highest domestic opening weekend. You know, um, if a film was only shown in a couple theaters, because it wasn't a big film, and then they re-release the film, they combine the numbers. There were several articles out there that you can look at to see how they get these numbers, and a lot of them kind of they're showing you the underhanded side of all this stuff. So people, a few people want to use that, and they want to sit there and Deadpool was the greatest, highest opening weekend ever. No, it wasn't. Star Wars has had that. Freaking the Nolan Batman movies, Harry Potter, all Spider-Man, Titanic, fucking Avatar. They all had higher numbers. You know what I mean? And it's just they're talking about those 2 days, that first 2 days. You know what I mean? Some of those other movies I mentioned, they hit those numbers on the first day. You know what I mean? Star Wars hit those numbers. I think Star Wars hit 90 million or something like that in pre-orders or pre-sales. It was something in that realm, and that was domestic alone. We're not talking about all the rest of the world. So anyway, it gets tiring. They're dick riding Deadpool really hard. And the movie it was fun. I'm not even going to diss the movie. I still hate the character. I still think he's a one-trick pony. I think there's only a few stories you could tell with him before you have to put him in the background, and he has to be comic relief, side supporting, whatever. He can't be the main character. Um, and it amazes me how somehow he got a film done, and there's all these other more interesting characters that have supporting cast, that have a point, that have, stuff going for it, and they're not the ones being relegated to films yet. They're stuck, relegated to the background. But I enjoyed Deadpool. It was pretty awesome. It took me back to see a rated R action film in the theater. Um, it's been a while. It's been a long while. I can't tell you what the last rated R action film was that I saw in the theater. That was like, no holds barred, don't hold back, just everything. Fucking, ass and titties out. Freaking, obligatory car chases with people getting run over and stomped, and a lot of headshots, and freaking the obligatory strip club scene. Um, it did all those. It felt like an '80s, like a late '80s action film. You know, had all the tropes, had all the cliches, it had all the jokes. It just wasn't taking itself so seriously like all of Bryan Singer. Well, I shouldn't say just Bryan Singer. All of the X films in general. The other X films take themselves way too seriously to the point where it's just not fun to watch. And I'm seeing people kind of coming around to this, and we've been saying this from day one. Maybe I should say day two, because it took me a little while to process the first X-Men because the hype was so big with the first X-Men. I was so happy that they made an X-Men movie, but then I was so underwhelmed by the film itself. But like the hype leading up to it had me so high that I was just like, huh, let me think about this for a while. And then like, about a week later I was like, yeah, no, it's not really that great. Um, they played my boy Cyclops to the side like a sucker, and then they continued that trend until they killed him off. So the fucking X-Men, it's the Cyclops and Wolverine show. It's not the Wolverine show. So for them to just throw him out like that, you get no love. And then the fact that in 16 years they haven't gotten shit right with those characters, even Wolverine. We haven't even seen Wolverine in his iconic costume yet. Deadpool first outing, I'm sorry, second outing, and he's wearing his costume, full on costume like that. Something's wrong. Something's terribly wrong. Even if Wolverine wore the costume and didn't wear the mask, something's really wrong. Captain America. This is a world where Spider-Man, Captain America, Thor, freaking Vision, they all showed up and looked pretty comic accurate, and Wolverine still hasn't. None of the X-Men have. So I'm not feeling it. I don't care what the arguments are out there. Bryan Singer is terrible for X-Men. He doesn't care about what the X-Men are supposed to be and what they were. So he's going to do what he thinks works. I mean, we're still doing this black leather bullshit. Anyway, so Deadpool was really nice. It was well done. It shows that we can still have rated R films, which I don't know why we needed to go back to Deadpool first. We need to go and make Deadpool for this to be a realization. When coming out of the box, Blade had already showed you that this was possible. Sleeper hit, and then the second movie was a box office success. It wasn't like a runaway success, but they made back their money. So it shows that it's done. There is an audience for it. There are stories that in comic form are very violent, very gory, and very adult. So for people to miss that and act like this is some weird shit that they could be done this way, like this is a first time thing. And then the other thing is the obligatory dick riding, because we know this is how Hollywood works. This is also how the internet works. So now Deadpool's successful. So now everybody says, yeah, make all the other ones rated R films. You know how long ago we were saying that each Marvel and DC film has its own flavor. It's got its own it fits into a genre. And there are certain characters like the Punisher. How do you do a Punisher film? How is it that like anybody was how do I put it? How is it that you also forget that like the Punisher is a violent character? If you're going to do a Punisher film, it has to be rated R because the Punisher is going to murk people. Him and Deadpool have a lot in common when it comes to that. They don't give a shit how they murk people. Some guy I saw online said that Deadpool is more violent than the Punisher. I'm like, dude, you've been reading the wrong shit. There's a lot. Garth Ennis's run on the Punisher, read that shit. Throughout the history of the damn Punisher, he's been pretty ruthless and pretty grimy about destroying folks. Matter of fact, go back and play the game that came out in the early 2000s for the PS2, Xbox. I think it also came out on the PC. It's heavily based on Garth Ennis's run and the film, which was also based on Garth Ennis's run. But they also tweaked things to make it tie back into the comics very well, and that game's amazing. Very violent. So much so that it was going to be banned. And in order to get the game out, they had to pull up Tarantino and make some of the gratuitously violent situational kills, the contextual, environmentally contextual kills. They had to make them black and white to kind of offset the amount of blood that was showing up on the screen or the amount of gore that was showing up on the screen. That's the Punisher. He doesn't give a fuck, That's part of why I like him so much. It's part of why he's always been one of my favorite characters, because here you have all these other characters who have rules and all this stuff, and he's like, they're the scum of the earth. My job is to cut them the fuck out of the equation. Cancer, surgeon, scalpel. Get them the fuck out of here. And I like that. That's the way it should be. I think if there was a superhero that could exist, he would be the Punisher, because Batman's way is not going to work. You keep putting them in the revolving door of the American justice system, and then you want to talk about justice and blah 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 and blah blah blah. And you're a millionaire or billionaire or whatever. You're a billionaire. You could pay to have them rehabilitated, or you could pay to have the right people in the right place to fix your fucking city. But instead, there's a lot of this idealistic fascist politics or fascist idealism that just doesn't work, you know. So the Punisher going out and murking all these villains, to me that works. That makes sense. Because I mean, if the cops can't catch him, fine, he can go out and do this. I mean, we've got killers that have been doing this shit for a long time and have, you know, gotten away with it and been and you know, their cases are open and no one's been able to track them down. Why can't a vigilante do the same thing, you know, especially with the skill set that Frank Castle has? So I don't know. He feels more plausible. His movies deserve the R rating, and they also deserve better writing. I admit that Warzone, as much as I love it, the writing was kind of in scenes and parts of the movie. The writing was there. It was very comic book oriented because they did take a lot of cues from the comics. You know, it felt like a story that that we've read multiple times in different eras of the Punisher's history. But it's just that things that led up to him killing the cop just felt kind of, or after, I'm sorry, him killing the cop, it all felt forced, and sometimes it felt like he was out of character because he was just so guilty. You know, he didn't pay attention to the fact that the cop was undercover playing a villain, and you dispatch villains. So if that happened, I mean, you got to be prepared for that being part of the job, you know. But I still like Warzone. It's a good example of another character, a Marvel character, who you couldn't really tell the story in PG-13. You know what I mean? Look at the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. Yeah, he didn't look like the Punisher because they didn't put him in the costume. They put skulls on his freaking knives. They really danced around it, but they had the spirit of the Punisher in that film. He was murking people. He was terribly disturbed, and it worked. You know, in my opinion, you can say what you want about it being an old film, you know, because there's all these millennials and newfangled, you know, film fans who go back and watch it, and because it's old, they diss the movie on that, and that's it. And they miss the point that the Punisher's body count was insane. The Punisher's motivations were the same. The fact that you know, the cops still couldn't catch him, that's very much the way he was in the comics, you know. So a lot of things were true to the character, there just were a lot of things that weren't, you know. So it wasn't a total package, but it's pretty close. But my point is, now you have a lot of people saying, "Oh, everything needs to be rated R," you know, and now all of a sudden their minds can go there. When all this time, all of us film fanatics, all of us comic book fans, that like we really read these books, we really knew these characters. We knew that we were in possession of comics that were more violent than the shows or the movies featuring these same characters. You know, like watching Daredevil on Netflix. It's another example of the street level characters can't have a PG-13 season or a PG-13 movie. You got to go all out because the villains have to do fucked up shit for you to really get it. You know what I mean? Jessica Jones, same thing. Would you have hated and felt conflicted the way you did about the Purple Man had you not seen him do both acts of good and extreme acts of evil? You got to have both extremes so that you understand how fucked up these characters are. Like Weapon X. You've yet to really see, before Deadpool, why Weapon X was such a bad idea. You always get like, it's always hinted at, but it's not like just they didn't commit and say these people at Weapon X are fucked up, but they do make mutants that end up being killing machines, you know? And Wolverine is one of those guys. So like in the X-Men movies, you just see Wolverine whining a lot, and that's it. You don't really understand why he's so pissed off. Why is he whining so much? How much of this was his, like, how much of this was voluntary on his part, and how much of this was manipulation? You know, like X-Men Origins kind of told you about some of this stuff, but like it needed to be solidified in a way where you're like, damn, that's fucked up. You know, Deadpool also distilled a lot of the character down to the essence. because like Copycat is like a really powerful. His girlfriend Vanessa is actually Copycat in the comics. She's a really powerful shapeshifter. She also was an assassin as well. And there's a whole bunch of shitty, like jacked up stories between the two of them. They started out as lovers, and then their relationship went sour, you know, and then they end up fighting a lot. That was what I thought was going to happen at some point in the story. You know, he's like head over heels. They're both head over heels. Then he decides to go off to Weapon X, and then she becomes bitter. And then when he comes back, she's a different person, and they can't reconcile. And you know, of course, I was expecting him to put some kind of comedy in there, like when she takes off his mask, like shit, I was willing to give it a chance if you didn't look like this, and then you know, go into your what we know is the shtick for those characters. But you know, they went in a different direction, and I don't mind. You know what I mean? It doesn't bother me. It's just something I noticed because I do know of Deadpool. I know from a lot of stories. I read a lot of X Force. I was one of the few that liked Leafield's art when he first started because it had more of an Arthur Adams kind of flair to it. I liked the fact that even when he started doing like the 90s X Force, um, he had more of a. His style was just different. I think when I was reading comics at that time, the books that stood out to me were all the ones that had very distinct styles. My favorites were Larson, Jim Lee. Jim Lee was at the top. Um, Campbell was number two. McFarlane was probably number three. No, Larson was number three. McFarlane was like number four. I'm sorry, I'm fucking it up. Silvestri was somewhere in there at the top, you know, the top bunch. And Mark Texeria, um, uh, freaking Jeff Smith. I loved Jeff Smith's work. Um, Jim Ballant, he was drawing Catwoman at the time. Good lord, he was drawing some women, and he was getting away with shit in that book that you're like, man, this is a DC book. It's got the comics code, you know, thing on it, the stamp. Like he can do this, you know. He was pulling off some shit, drawing some sexy ass chicks. Um, but like each of them were different. Joe Mad, um, freaking what was the other guy? Jusco. I liked a lot of Joe Jusco's stuff, and he was doing like Marvel Masterworks and shit. But like there were just all these guys were so different. The Kubert brothers, and their dad. I loved styles that didn't look exactly the same. I didn't like I liked Jim Lee, but I didn't like any of the clones. Even though Campbell started out kind of like a Jim Lee clone somewhat, there was still a little bit of anime in the faces, so the characters felt different. So you know, so the overall point is just Liefeld, you know, he was different, and that's what I liked about his work. But as far as X Force goes, I forgot to mention that I was big on Greg Capullo when it switched to Greg Capullo, because there was a period of time where the books were just kind of meh, and they had all these guest artists, you know, Art T-Bert and all those kind of guys, and it was like, you know, too much of this Jim Lee wannabe shit, and they didn't have actual Jim Lee doing the book. When it switched and Greg Capullo started drawing it, I was hooked, super hooked, and that was one of the books that one of the major stories in those books at the time was this big beef between Cable, Domino, Deadpool, and Vanessa. And he kept talking about Vanessa, and there were like two Vanessas. You saw one that was kind of timid, like a regular woman, and then another one that was like bloodthirsty, and she was killing off characters and fighting with Deadpool, and it was pretty cool shit. I mean, I know I'm probably bastardizing the plot and stuff because I can't remember all the details because it's been a while. I'm gonna read it when I finish this. Probably should have read it before this, but you know, the point isn't the story full on. The point is the fact that there are things in it that you know, we didn't get in this, and people are pretending like, you know. And I've always said it. Deadpool has that magic fan base that doesn't really read Deadpool comics, but wants to tell you everything about the character. You know, they want to comment on comics, but they don't read comics. You know. And that's why the movie did so well. We knew it was going to do well, and then it's doing even better because the people who handled the film are competent. They said, here's this existing source material. Let's mimic the things that work the best with the source material, because they saw that on its own, as is, it's not really that compelling. You know what I mean? Deadpool alone, he's funny, but his shtick will wear thin if it's overdone. And the comics have overdone it infinitum. It's fucking annoying. You every time you see him, he has to talk to you. Every time you see him, he has to make a pop culture reference, or several of them until you're tired of hearing them. In this, it's so self-aware. He's so self-aware that he's making jokes about the actor that plays him. He's, annoying to everybody else, just like he is in the comics, because that's one thing they got right. And every character has their shtick. Like, I couldn't believe Colossus was actually talking about being a hero in this. I'm like, holy shit, they're actually making Colossus act like an elder, instructor at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. The fact that, Deadpool was making jokes about the fact that there was only 2 X-Men characters in there besides, he's not really an X-Men character. He's more of a, or I should say, 2 X-Men members, actual X-Men members. And I know Deadpool at some point in several stories is an actual full-on X-Man. But what I'm saying is that's not who he's supposed to be, Not in the classic, because this is what they're pulling from. Everyone's pulling from this except for Bryan Singer. Fight scenes were amazing in this. They actually were like, yeah, XMA looks really good on screen, so let's have him do some of that. Throw in some guns, throw in Gina Carano. Oh my God. I was sold just with her being in the film alone. Like, Gina Carano in another life. Oh my God. Gina Carano. And you can tell she's grown a little bit as far as she's more comfortable being in front of the camera, because she doesn't seem so stiff and so like she's acting. She just feels like they're using her the way that they used to use Jet Li when he first started showing up in like US films, where he had limited dialogue and everything was implied or conveyed through their physical, acting. And she was perfect with that, Girls, beautiful brunettes that are thick, that can fight. It's like the best thing in the world. My God. Because if they can fight like that, then, man, you already know where I'm going with this. But I'm not going to do that because I like to keep it a little bit family friendly. Just a little bit. For the hardcore families out there. Man, it was good. It was really good. There's a lot of things that people should learn from this, and I'm hoping Bryan Singer and company are watching. Fuck Bryan Singer's vision of the X-Men, because that's not the X-Men. The reason why we all pile up in droves to see this shit is because we like the characters as they appeared in the comics. Fuck all the people saying, oh, you want everything to be just like the comics. Yeah, we do. That's the point. That's why it's titled comic book character. Choose whatever comic book character you want. But that's why the title of the fucking movie is the title of the fucking comic book character, you fucking dipshits. And it's annoying that that's an argument. That's even a thought when we bring this stuff up. Because had this been a book about the Bible, everybody would be fucking panties in a bunch, freaking burning down theaters, fucking sacrificing firstborn children because it strayed from, what was written. Had this been about, like when Lord of the Rings came out, you all bitch and moan about how certain scenes weren't exactly what happened. I mean, 95% of the 4 or 5 hour films were was what you read the book, with the exception of a couple things, and you guys are up in arms about that shit. But then comic books, because it's such lesser literary work, it's of such a lesser quality. All of it, all comics in general, is so low when it comes to respect for literary material that it doesn't need to be on point. It doesn't need to have the same integrity that the book may or may not have. Fuck you. It should. Because if I wrote a book, and if you wrote a book, you would want that shit in there. I mean, maybe not. Maybe some of you are just like, pay me, and you can do whatever the fuck you want to do with my project. Good for you that you have that, ability. Some of us, we want what we came up with, what we struggled with, getting out there. We want that shit out there so everybody can see it, and we want them to get it, because that's what separates this thing from the next thing. If everything can be, every character, every franchise can be shat on in favor of some studio exec who did not do comics before this, who knows nothing of comics, but now has the ego to think that he could write or produce a movie of a comic book character that's better than the book without actually, referencing the book. That's just stupid. That doesn't even make sense. That's like your brother who can't run saying he could be a better football player than this professional football player who's won Super Bowls and who's, fucking trucked over some people in his time. And, your brother's like, yeah, I'm better than him. I just naturally can do all that shit, even though we know he can't. You know what I mean? Like, no. There are some things that, you have to actually build up the skill to do these things. But, this is just my perspective on these things. But as you're seeing, a lot of the things that you've heard me say are coming to pass, especially with film. Because a lot of these things, it just makes sense, Like, if you want a cake, you go to someone who knows how to bake a fucking cake, right? Yes, some people have skills that could translate into baking, but some people, it's just like, why waste the time dealing with someone who has no idea how this shit works when you could actually go to the person who knows how to do it? You want to learn martial arts, you don't go to your friend who just watches movies. You go to a martial arts school and you get an instructor who can teach you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's basic understanding of anything. You want to learn how to draw, you go to an artist that can teach. You go to a teacher who used to be an artist. You don't go to someone who likes art but has no idea where to start with that shit. And this is what we're getting in Hollywood. You're getting people who, they have skills in this area but not this area, but they're so fucking arrogant and pompous that they're saying, I could just jump in there and do it. It don't take any skill. Look at these motherfuckers. It's not like they've been spending their whole life creating this shit. It's not like, their rent didn't depend on how well this book sold. You know what I mean? Like, keeping the lights on and keeping food in the fridge didn't depend on how fast they could get the book done so it could be on time every month for however many years they worked on the fucking book. No, that couldn't have been it. Some of you guys, I'm telling you, you need to think. Think past what you hear the rest of the internet saying. Because a lot of the people, the majority of the people on the internet don't know what they're talking about. The point, though, one of the biggest points I want to make is that, like, enjoy the film. Fuck how much money the film made. We're not the execs. We're not the studios. We don't make anything when those movies hit those numbers. It doesn't even mean anything for the future of comic book films because we're still going to get what we're going to get. We're still going to get a whole bunch of movies trying to pretend to be Deadpool because this is how Hollywood does it. When The Matrix came out, ooh, wire work. Forget the fact that Jackie Chan had already introduced you to martial arts films and, all that craziness. And I think by then Crouching Tiger had been out. So other things had been introduced to you. Not to mention the history of American cinema. We've had lots of, wire-assisted martial arts films. Just none were as slick and as clean as the Matrix was. The Matrix was very clean and very modern, and you hadn't seen that before the Matrix. But remember when that came out, everybody was trying to do those kind of films. Movies that just didn't need to even be made. They just were just kind of like, nah, don't give them the budget. It should have been a straight-to-video film, or give them the budget and make it a straight-to-video film. You know what I mean? Or like, let's do it as an animated film. Movies that didn't have the people with the know-how, like the Charlie's Angels films. Like, no, you had the wrong combination of people. That's why the movies look weird. They're fun to some degree, but they look weird, especially when the action happens. The choreography is terrible, and maybe if they were more gifted at the stuff, it would have looked better. Shit, not maybe. It really probably, the blocking tapes of those fight scenes in those movies probably were amazing. But because they were not talented, it's not, I don't care what anyone says, Lucy Liu is not a talented fighter. So, it's one of those things, but that was how it was done. They saw that, they were like, oh shit. When Jackie Chan came and his shtick was, I do all my own stunts. Every actor in Hollywood, I do my own stunts. Nobody gives a shit because that wasn't your shtick until you saw Jackie Chan. Find a new shtick. Stop copying. And we got a lot of subpar movies with actors throwing themselves in harm's way so that they could have that on their resume. This is Hollywood. They do this with everything. Avengers created the shared universe in a film. It popularized it because there were other films that took place in the same universes, like freaking a lot of Kevin Smith's films. Say what you will about Kevin Smith, like him or hate him, he did have a universe, like a shared universe, and they kind of with the Avengers were like, hey, we can do this, and now there's all these studios trying to do that shit. You know, fucking Universal, they're gonna do that with all the monsters. So Dracula Untold or Unbound or whatever it was called. They're going to do a mummy one. They're going to do a werewolf one. They're going to do a Frankenstein one. I think they might have already done the Frankenstein one. I don't remember because I'm not into them, but they're trying to do a shared universe. Once all the monsters get their own films, then they're going to put them all together in a battle royale type thing. I don't care. I'll watch that. I don't really care about the others. But you see where I'm going with this. I'm showing you that, you know, the quote unquote trends are not really trends. It's just bandwagoning. It's just like why I stopped watching UFC. The last champ happened to be a boxer, wrestler, jiu-jitsu person. And he beat a wrestler. He beat the shit out of a wrestler because the wrestler had one bag of tricks to pull from. So now everybody who comes after that champ, now they all need to cross-train in the exact same things because you couldn't possibly just train in your discipline and study up the other disciplines and learn how to defend against them. No, you couldn't do that. That wouldn't make any sense. When, you know, a lot of the greatest masters, that's how they stay on top of their shit. You can cross-train all you want, but you represent what you represent, and you just make sure you're aware of what else is out there. That's how you stay on top. But as we've seen, that's not how it works in the UFC. You know, outlaw all the really good styles, the guys who use styles that people just have issues dealing with, because in the end, it is entertainment. It's not about who the ultimate fighter really is. It's about how much can we string, how long can we string people along with these fights where it looks one way, but we know it's actually something else. You know, you pay to see these two guys spend a long time fucking around for a bit until the guy is like, you know, this is the part where you fall down. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference. WWE is the same way. It's a big difference, you know, between actually coming out and, you know, attempting to do something different and then garnering all the respect and all the accolades from that and then being successful from that, continuing to do what you do, and everyone else jumping on your bandwagon, you know? And I get it. The stage is usually set by the winner, so if you win, it's other people are going to try to do what you do. But when it comes to the superhero game and comics and such, come on, there's so many comics out there. There's so many characters. There's so many genres that are represented in comics. When you're making films, it should be awesome for you as a filmmaker to be able to pick a franchise or a character that fits in your wheelhouse as a director. You know what I mean? As a writer, you know, as a special effects guy, as a whatever. You know, and that's not what's going on. I mean, Marvel kind of is doing that because they appoint the right director with the right, you know, situation, the right film. Like, I mean, look at Winter Soldier. Who would have thought that that was even possible? Even though there are whole runs of Captain America that are like this. Who would have thought we would have ever seen such a brilliantly done Captain America film? Ever. Ever. I didn't even expect it. That's why it blew me away so much. And that's still, to me, to this day, to me, it's the best Marvel film to date. You know what I mean? Like, all the stuff Deadpool did right for a Fox, you know, Marvel film, Captain America does right just as a Marvel film in general. I mean, the only thing that I can say that is a knock against it is they did the psych, I'm not dead, you know, that every Marvel movie has had up to this point. I think with the exception of Ant-Man, which Ant-Man pretty much, you know, is going to have it. You know, they're going to find the Wasp, the original Wasp, in the next film. It's just not even, it's a no-brainer. But anyway, that's my thoughts. I know that was a jumbled mess. There was a whole bunch of stuff I've jumped all over, but I hope I cleaned it up very well, because at the end, the points are still the same. The money doesn't matter. The integrity of the film does. Transformers, collectively, $4 billion, and they're some of the worst films ever committed to celluloid, not because of the special effects, not because of, you know, the actual actors themselves, because you have to remember, The actors are pulling from a script that was poorly written. They're given no direction, and they're filmed with the most expensive of everything. That's why the movies made so much money, is because they clearly look like they cost a lot of money to make, and that usually wows the average moviegoer. So the $4 billion tag that they of money they brought in, that doesn't really say anything. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean shit. That just means a lot of people went to go see the movie. It doesn't really speak to the quality of the film. It's just like I say with reviewers. You can love some shit and not be able to look at it objectively as it is, but that doesn't mean that because you love it, it's good. You know what I mean? If objectively the thing sucks, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, who gives a shit if you like it? You just like it for your own reasons. You don't know quality. If we're talking about quality, you need to tell us, does the thing actually stand up to the level of quality that they claim they can, they're coming with, So that's all I'm getting at. It's annoying, and it hurts when you get online and you're passionate about films and you want to see what people have to say. Are people seeing the things for what they really are? And then you see a bunch of dipshits repeating the same conversation from the last 10, 15 superhero films that came out, the last 10, 15 action figures that came out. You know, it's just like, man, is it ever going to change? Are you guys ever going to notice? So, get at me in the comments. We'll do what we normally do, and I will talk to you later. Peace outside.